You spent $40 last spring on tomato plants. Half of them died by August. Next April, you will spend $40 again. Break time 5s. The spring after that, the same transaction. Seeds, transplants. Break time 05s. Fertilizer. The annual vegetable cycle that the garden industry profits from every single season, year after year, by design. Break time 0.05s. This video is about something different. 9 food plants that you put in the ground once, 10 for a season or two, break time equal 5s, and then harvest for the next 20 years. Some of them will still be producing food in this exact spot in 2046. Break time 05s. A few of them will outlive the decade after that. These are not difficult plants. They are not exotic imports. Break time 05s. They are not expensive at the point of purchase, and after that initial purchase, most of them cost nothing at all. Break time 05s. The problem is that a plant you buy once is not good for the business model of stores that want you back every May. Break time. Most of these 9 are increasingly hard to find at standard garden centers. Some are almost entirely absent from the mainstream vegetable aisle. Break time 05s, that absence is not an accident. Break time 05s, number 9 on this list, is a native North American food plant that Lewis and Clark documented as a survival crop in 1805. Break time 05s, it produces more calories per square foot than almost any other perennial vegetable. It requires almost no maintenance, and once you plant it, break time 05s, you will never fully stop growing it. The plant will see to that itself. We are going through all 9, zone by zone. Break time 05s, sun requirement by sun requirement. Break time 05s. We start with the plant that most experienced homesteaders and long-term kitchen gardeners say was the single best investment they ever made in break time 05s, tea-eatable garden. Stay through number 9. That one changes how you think about food production. Break time 05s. Before we start, drop your USDA hardiness zone in the comments below. All 9 of these plants are zone rated. If you give me your zone, break time 5s, I can tell you which ones survive your winters without any protection. Most viewers here are in zones 5 through 8. All 9 work there. Break time 05s. If you are in zone through 4, stay with me. 6 of these are still fully in play for you. Break time 5s. And one of them thrives harder in colder winters than it does in mild ones. Break time 05s. Subscribe if you want the full cold climate perennial breakdown in a future video. A quick clarification on what edible perennial actually means. Break time gets 05s because the term gets used loosely. A true edible perennial is a food plant that survives winter in your climate zone. Break time 0.05s to regrows from its own root system the following spring and continues to produce harvestable food for multiple years. Typically more than 5, break time 0.05s often more than 20. Some of the plants on this list are documented to live and produce for 30 or 40 years in a single location. Break time 05s, most vegetables are annuals. You plant them, they produce, they die, you buy again next spring. Break time 05s, the 9 plants here are the structural opposite of that model. Break time 05s, they represent a different philosophy of growing food, one that prioritizes long-term return over short-term convenience. Break time 0.05s, depths of root system over seasonal replanting and compounding value over repeating the same transaction every April. Break time 05 Cornell Cooperative Extension has documented several of these plants as viable food crops for American home gardens across multiple decades of break time 05s research. Break time 05 Seed Savers Exchange maintains heritage varieties of a number of them that consistently outperform commercial cultivars in home garden conditions. Break 5 USDA research confirms the nutritional value of the full list as legitimate food crops, not novelty items, not ornamental curiosities. Break time 05s, but real food with real yield. Let's go. Number 1. Asparagus. Asparagus officinalis. USDA Zone 3 through 8. Break time 05s, full sun preferred. It will tolerate light partial shade, but production drops measurably. Average water. Well-drained soil is non-negotiable. Break time 5s. If you are going to plant one edible perennial in your lifetime, break time 05s, most experienced kitchen gardeners will tell you without hesitation that it should be asparagus. The economics are simple and compelling. Break time 05s. 1 pound of fresh asparagus at an American grocery store costs between $3 and $7 depending on the season and your region. Break time 5s. A well-established asparagus bed in USDA Zone 5 will produce 2 to 4 pounds of spears per 10-foot row per spring for 20 to 30 years. Break time 5s, you plant it once. The first year you do not harvest anything at all. You let the ferny foliage develop fully and feed the crowns underground. Break time 05s. The second year, you take a light harvest, a few spears, maybe 10 days worth. By year 3, break time 05s, you harvest freely for the full 6 to 8 week spring window. By year 10, break time 5s. You have a food crop that requires almost no annual labor and feeds your household every spring without replanting, without purchasing, without fail. Break time 05s, buy crowns, not seed. 1-year-old crowns are the standard recommendation from Cornell Cooperative Extension for home gardens. Break time 05s, 2-year crowns are marketed as a shortcut but do not reliably outperform 1-year crowns over the full lifespan of the bed. The transplant stress of break time 05s, larger crowns often negates the age advantage. Jersey Knight is the cultivar bred specifically for American garden conditions. Break time 05s, it shows solid tolerance for heavy soils and reliable disease resistance across a wide zone range. Break time 05s, Purple Passion is worth noting for home gardeners specifically. It produces more tender spears than the green standard and can be eaten raw directly. Break time 05s. Off the plant. Mary Washington is the old heirloom standard, still widely available, still reliable. Planting depth and spacing matter. Break time 05s. Plant crowns 18 inches apart in rows in a trench 8 inches deep. Cover with 2 inches of soil at planting. Break time 05s. Add more soil gradually as the shoots emerge through the season, filling the trench by end of first season. The trench method establishes a deep, break time 05 secure root system that is the foundation of a 20-year productive bed. One critical caution: asparagus is allelopathic. Break time 05s, it releases chemical compounds into the surrounding soil that inhibit seed germination. Do not plant it adjacent to your annual vegetable beds. Break time 05s, give it a dedicated permanent bed, one it can occupy productively for 3 decades without interfering with anything else. Break time 05s, the harvest window is narrow, 6 to 8 weeks in spring, roughly April through June, depending on your zone. Outside that window, break time 05s, you let the ferns grow. The ferns are doing the work of building next year's crop underground. Do not cut them. Do not mow them. Break time 05s, let them stand until they die back naturally in fall. Number 2, rhubarb, Rhubarb hybridum, USDA Zone 3 through 8, full sun to partial shade. Break time 05s, medium water. Humus-rich, well-drained soil. Rhubarb is one of the most cold-tolerant edible perennials available to American home gardeners. Break time 05s, and it is one of the most underplanted. In Zone 3, northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, the Upper Peninsula, break time 05s, northern New England. Rhubarb does not merely survive, it thrives. Break time 05s. The extended dormancy and the hard freeze followed by spring thaw is precisely the cycle this plant evolved for. Break time 05s, a Zone 3 rhubarb plant, given adequate space and organic matter, will outperform the same variety grown in Zone 7. The stalks are the edible part. Break time 05s, the leaves are toxic. High oxalic acid content in the leaves makes them harmful if eaten in any significant quantity. This is worth stating once. Break time is equal 5s clearly. Do not eat the leaves. That said, the leaves are an excellent mulching material because no pest or wildlife pressure touches them. Break time 05s, you will encounter advice that rhubarb needs dividing every 5 to 7 years. Break time equal 5s. That advice applies specifically to plants that are showing signs of crowding. Smaller stalks, reduced vigor, crowded crowns at the soil surface. Break 5s. A well-spaced rhubarb plant that is not crowded can go 15 or 20 years between divisions. The signal to divide is a decline in production. Break time 05s, not a date on a calendar. Victoria is the heirloom variety that most experienced rhubarb growers default to. Thick, productive. Break time 05s handles both cold winters and warm summers with equal reliability. Break time 05s, crimson red, produces deeply colored stalks and is the most commonly available variety at commercial nurseries. Break time 05s, Canada Red, is the cultivar specifically worth seeking for Zones 3 and 4. Excellent cold hardiness, consistent performance across difficult winters, break time Peeps 05s, and a flavor quality that outcompetes most grocery store products significantly. Do not harvest in year 1. Break time 05s, take a light harvest, a few stalks maximum, in year 2. From year 3 onward, harvest freely during the 6 to 8 week spring window. Break time 05s, pull stalks at the base rather than cutting them. Pulling cleanly removes the stalk without leaving a stub that can introduce rot at the crown. Break time 05s. The flavor difference between fresh pulled garden rhubarb and the product sitting in a grocery store bin is substantial. Acidity, depth, break time 05s, complexity. The store product has been in transit and cold storage long enough to flatten the flavor profile noticeably. Break time 05s, a stalk pulled and used the same day as a different ingredient. This is a plant worth growing for the culinary quality alone. Break time. Independent of the economics. Number 3. Horseradish, Armoraceae rusticana, USDA Zone 3 through 9, full sun, low water once established. Break time 05s, tolerance nearly sissy soil that drains. Horseradish is almost impossible to kill. This is a feature, not a liability, once you understand it. Break time 5s. A single crown planted in a designated spot will produce harvestable roots in the first growing season and will continue producing indefinitely. Break times. The challenge with horseradish is not growing it. Every condition in the American temperate climate favors this plant. It is containing it. Break times 05s, the roots spread laterally and establish new crowns broadly. Break time 05s, any fragment of root left in the soil during harvest will generate a new plant the following spring. This is a plant for a designated permanent spot. Break time 05s, a raised bed with a physical barrier installed below the soil line works well. A large container sunk to its rim works well. Break time 05s, an area of your property where you are comfortable with it expanding. Along a fence line at a property boundary in a rough corner works well. Break time 05s. Given those parameters, it will produce more fresh horseradish than most households can consume every year without end. Break time 05s. Commercial horseradish is almost always processed with white vinegar and preservatives. Fresh grated horseradish, a root pulled from the ground, break time 05 washed and processed within the hour, is a categorically different product. Break time 5s. The heat and volatility of a fresh root is intense in a way that jar product no longer is by the time it reaches the shelf. Break time 05s. Anyone who has grated fresh horseradish for the first time and stood too close to the cutting board understands this immediately. Break time 5s. The standard commercial variety is Malin or Kren. Break time 05s, also widely sold simply as common horseradish. Bohemian variety is an alternative that shows somewhat less lateral spreading, a useful distinction. Break time 05s if containment is a primary concern. Harvest roots in fall, after the first frost. The cold converts carbohydrates in the root and deepens the flavor. Break time 05s, roots 1 to 2 inches in diameter at the crown and 12 to 18 inches long, are at their best. Break time 05s, leave the smaller side roots in the ground. They become next year's crop without any replanting. Number 4. French sorrel, Rumex acetosa. Break time U5 zone 3 through 9, full sun to partial shade, low water. Tolerates poor soil where most kitchen garden plants underperform. Break time 05 sorrel is the edible perennial that the great majority of American home gardeners have never tasted, never grown. Break 5s. And never seen on a restaurant menu, despite the fact that it has been central to European kitchen gardens for several centuries. Break time and despite the fact that it grows with almost no attention in nearly every climate zone in the continental United States. Break time 5s. The flavor is distinctly sharp and lemony. Break time 05s. High oxalic acid content gives it a tartness that is functional in cooking in ways that most greens are not. It provides acidity without. Break time 05s. Vinegar, brightness without citrus. Sorrel soup is the classic French preparation. Simple, pale green made with stock and cream, finished with the sorrel wilted briefly at the end. Young raw leaves in a salad cut through rich dressings. Briefly braised with butter. Break times. It reduces into a sauce for fish or poached eggs that is used in professional kitchens at a cost that makes growing your own seem obvious. Break time 05s. It is also one of the fastest establishing edible perennials on this list. Break time 05s. A plant put in the ground in spring will be producing harvestable leaves within weeks. In Zone 5, break time 05s. Sorrel survives under snow and resumes active growth before most annual vegetables can even be started indoors under lights. Break time 05s. It is often the first fresh food coming out of a kitchen garden in early spring. Break time 05s. Which is the precise moment when fresh produce from the garden is hardest to come by. Break time 5s. The plant will attempt to flower and set seed in its second and third year. Break times 0.05s cut the flowering stalks before they fully develop. This redirects the plant's energy back into leaf production and extends the productive season. Break time 05s significantly. Buckler leaf sorrel, Rumex scutatus, is a related species worth noting. It produces a smaller, break time 0.5 shield-shaped leaf with a somewhat milder flavor and a more ornamental growth habit. Both species are perennial across the same zone range. Break time 05s for maximum culinary productivity. Rumex acetosa is the standard choice. Number 5. Egyptian walking onion, Allium proliferum. Break time 05s to zone 3 through 9. Full sun, low water, tolerates a wide range of soils including heavy clay. Break time 5, the Egyptian walking onion, is one of the most genuinely self-sufficient food plants in the edible perennial category. It does not produce seeds. Break time 05 instead, it produces small bulblets, called topsets, at the top of each stalk in late summer. Like break time 05's not. These topsets increase in size and weight as they mature, and the stalk bends progressively under the load until the topsets contact the soil. Break time 05's, they root wherever they touch. The plant literally walks across your garden, propagating itself season after season. Break time 05's without any intervention from you. Every stage of this plant is edible. The young green tops in spring are usable as scallions. Mild, fresh. Break time 05's available before almost any other green thing is growing. The underground bulb can be harvested and used like a small shallot or onion. Break time 05's, the topsets. The small bulblets at the top of the stalk can be eaten fresh, pickled, or planted to expand your stand. Break time 05's. This is a plant with a year-round harvest window in mild zones and a 2-season window in cold ones. Cold hardiness is exceptional. Break time 05 zone 3 winters do not affect it. The plant goes dormant, the above-ground portion dies back. Break time 05's, and it returns reliably in spring from the underground bulb system. In zone 6 and warmer, break time 05's. The green tops often remain harvestable through mild winters without dying back at all. Break time 05's. There are no named cultivars to source for this species. Egyptian walking onions are typically sold by type. Purchase topsets from a seed company. Break time 5 small nursery, or a neighbor who grows them. Break time 05's, one small clump planted this spring will produce enough topsets to expand your planting significantly by fall of the same year. In 3 years, break time 05's, a single planting, becomes a self-sustaining, spreading, multi-harvest stand. Plant in a bed where you want them to remain and spread. Break time 05's, manage the direction of spread by harvesting topsets before they root out of bounds. Break time 05's, work with the plant's tendency towards self-propagation rather than against it. 5 plants down, 4 to go, the first 5. Asparagus, rhubarb, break time 05's, horseradish, sorrel, walking onion are the foundational tier, cold hardy across nearly the full continental zone range. Break time 05's, low maintenance once established. Multi-decade producers with minimal annual inputs. If you planted all 5 this season, break time 05's, you would have fresh food coming from your property every year for the rest of the decade without replanting a single one. Break time 05's. The 4 we are covering now operate in a different category. Higher ceiling on culinary distinctiveness. Break time 05's, more specific site requirements in some cases. Break time 05's. And number 9, we are still saving it for last, is the one that most people hear about and dismiss before they hear the full argument. Break time, going to ask you to stay for it. Number 6, lovage, Levisticum officinale, USDA Zone 3 through 9, full sun to partial shade, medium water. Break time, deep, fertile soil produces the most vigorous plants, but established lovage tolerates lean conditions. Lovage is a giant. Break time 05's. At full maturity in a good growing season, a well-established plant reaches 5 to 6 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide. Break time 5's. The hollow stems are sturdy, the leaves are dark green, glossy, and aromatic. The smell and flavor are unmistakably celery-like. Same plant family, break time 05's Apiaceae, with a deeper and more complex quality than the celery available at any supermarket. Every part of the plant is edible. Leaves, stems, break time equal 5 seeds and roots. Break time 05's. A single established lovage plant in full summer production can generate more usable leaf and stem material per season than most households can work. Break time equal 5's a through. The leaves dry well and hold their flavor significantly better than parsley or basil in dried form. Break time 05's, lovage salt. Dried and powdered leaves, blended with coarse sea salt at roughly 1 part lovage to 4 parts salt, is a standard pantry preparation. Break 5's in some European culinary traditions and requires zero cost once you have a producing plant. Break time 05's. The hollow stems of mature lovage have been used as cocktail straws in drinks where the intense celery and ice flavor is intentional, notably in bloody. Break times to merry variations. Seed Savers Exchange maintains a heritage lovage strain that is substantially more vigorous than the commercially common lines. Break time 05's, worth seeking out if you are sourcing from seed. The plant disappears completely in winter in zones where hard freezes occur. Break time 05's, a lovage plant that was 6 feet tall in August will be invisible by November in Zone 5. It returns reliably in spring. Break time 05's, The new growth in late March and April, before the plant has reached full size, is among the most tender and cleanly flavored of the year, break time 05s. And it appears at the exact moment when the garden is otherwise producing almost nothing. One plant is sufficient for most households. Break time 05's 2 plants produce more leaf material than most families can integrate into regular cooking. Know how you plan to use lovage before you grow it. Once established, it gives you no choice but to use it. Number 7. Sea kale, Cranberry marittima, USDA Zone 4 through 9, full sun, low water, sandy, break time equal 5's well-drained soil is ideal. This plant evolved on coastal shingle beaches. Break time 05's sea kale is the edible perennial that professional chefs have known about for decades, and American home gardeners have collectively not yet. Break time 05's discovered. That gap will narrow. The plant is gaining serious attention in food writing, kitchen garden design, and restaurant sourcing circles. Break time 05's. And the reason is straightforward. It produces something genuinely unusual. In early spring, before the main vegetative growth begins, break time 5's sea kale sends up tightly packed pale shoots from the crown. Break time 05's, these emerging shoots, called chards, can be blanched by covering them with a terracotta forcing pot or any light-excluding container placed over. Break time equal 5's, the crown in late winter. Break time Pro 5 blanched sea kale chards develop a flavor profile that food writers consistently describe as reminiscent of hazelnuts or almonds. Break time 05's, with a tenderness that is unusual for a member of the brassica family. The texture holds up to brief cooking. The culinary application is refined. Break time 05's. It is the kind of vegetable that makes people stop eating and ask what they are eating. After the chards are harvested in spring, break time 05's, the plant produces substantial blue-green foliage and a broad mass of small white flowers that are both edible and highly attractive to pollinators. Break time 5's. The flowering structure of a mature sea kale plant is architecturally distinctive in a kitchen garden in a way few other vegetables match. It is slow. Break time equal 5's, year 1 is unremarkable above ground. The root system is establishing itself. Year 2 shows improvement. Year 3 and beyond, break time U5's, a fully established sea kale plant is a productive, attractive, essentially zero-maintenance crop. In a Zone 6 kitchen garden bed, break time 05's plants 20 years old are documented. Break time 05's, this is a plant that asks for patience in years 1 and 2 and returns the investment for 2 decades after that. Break time equal 5's, root cuttings, called thongs, are the traditional propagation method and establish faster than growing from seed. Break time 05's, source from a specialty herb nursery or a dedicated seed company. Plant in the sunniest, best drained spot available and leave it entirely alone. Break time E5's, number 8. Globe artichoke, Sonara cardunculus varscolamus, USDA Zone 5 through 9, full sun, medium water. Rich, deeply worked. Break time 05's, well-drained soil. The globe artichoke is the most architecturally dramatic edible perennial you can establish in a temperate garden. At full size, break time of 5's, the plant reaches 4 to 5 feet tall and 4 to 6 feet wide. Break time 05's, the foliage is deeply lobed and silver green, genuinely ornamental in a way that very few vegetable plants are. Break time 05's, the flower heads, the artichokes, are large, complex, and deeply flavored when harvested at the right stage. They are also, if left to open fully, break time 05's among the most striking flowers in any garden setting. A single established plant in Zone 7 or warmer produces multiple harvestable heads per season. Break time 05's, the central head, which develops first, is the largest. The side buds that follow are smaller but equally flavorful. Break time 05's day productivity increases substantially after year 2 as the root system extends and the plant reaches its mature structure. In Zone 5 and 6, break time 05's winter protection is necessary in most years to carry the plant through. Break time 05's. A generous mulch of straw laid over the crown after the first killing frost is sufficient in most cases. Break time 05's, Zone 5 gardeners in microclimates, south-facing slopes, break time 5'd areas near masonry structures that hold heat, often overwinter artichokes successfully without any additional intervention. Break time 05's, green globe is the widely available commercial standard, reliable across the zone range. Break time 05's Violetto is an Italian heritage cultivar with purple-tinged heads, a somewhat nuttier flavor, and a longer harvest window that extends into summer. Break time 05's Imperial Star was specifically bred for production in Zone 5 and cooler. It sets heads in its first season from transplants. Break time 05's, making it the practical choice for gardeners who want artichokes before year 2. The artichoke is a thistle, Break time 5s. The flower that develops from a head left unharvested is large, intensely purple, and structurally spectacular. Break time 5s. Some gardeners intentionally leave 1 or 2 heads per plant to flower each season. Break time 5s. The dried flower head persists through winter as a striking architectural element. The plant produces food, flowers, structure. Break time 5s and late season pollinator value simultaneously. Number 9. Jerusalem artichoke, Helianthus tuberosus, USDA Zone 3 through 9. Break time 5s, full sun to partial shade. Low water, virtually any soil including poor, compacted, and neglected ground. Break time 5s. The name is a compounded historical confusion. It is not from Jerusalem. It is not an artichoke. It is a native North American sunflower. Break time 5s. And the edible part is the tuber, a knobby, irregular root that sits underground and produces in quantities that are break time 5s. Once you have grown this plant for a full season, genuinely surprising, the flavor is unlike a potato. It is nutty, mildly sweet, break time 5s, and has a crisp texture raw that softens to something entirely different when cooked. Break time 5s food writers most often describe it as a cross between a potato and a water chestnut. Break time 5s, with a complexity that makes it more versatile than that comparison suggests. Break time 05s, Lewis and Clark documented this plant in 1805 as an important food source used by multiple Native American nations across the Great Plains and eastern break time 5s woodlands. The Abenaki people of New England cultivated it, the Ojibwe, the Iroquois Confederacy. Break time 05s, it was already a fully domesticated food crop with thousands of years of cultivation history behind it before European contact. Break time 05s, the first European explorers in North America wrote about it as a novel discovery. Break time 05s. The plant had already been feeding people on this continent for longer than recorded European history. Nutritionally, break time 05s, the Jerusalem artichoke, is not a potato replacement. It functions differently. The primary carbohydrate in the tuber is inulin, not starch. Break time 05 zoti inulin is a soluble dietary fiber that passes through the small intestine undigested and reaches the large intestine. Break time 5s, where it serves as a prebiotic food source for beneficial gut bacteria. Break time 05s, USDA research documents the high inulin content of Helianthus tuberosus as a meaningful contribution to gut microbiome support. Break time 05s. This is a functional food plant, not merely a calorie source. The plant itself grows to 8 to 12 feet tall above ground. Break time 5s, in late summer and early fall, it produces bright yellow sunflower-like flowers. Fully edible, break time 05s significant as late-season nectar sources for pollinators preparing for winter. Break time 05s. The flowers appear weeks after most other flowering plants have finished. Break time 05s, providing a resource window that matters to bees and butterflies in the critical pre-dormancy period. Break time 05s. The above-ground plant dies back completely in fall after the first frost. The tubers underground are fully cold-hardy to zone 3 and beyond. Break time 05s. You dig them in fall after the frost has killed the top growth. The cold converts some of the inulin to fructose and improves the flavor. Break time 05 significantly. Tubers store well unwashed in damp sand in a cool location in the refrigerator. Break time 05s, they can remain in the ground through winter in zone 5 and warmer for a fresh harvest as needed. Break time 05s. This is where the word invasive comes from when people discuss this plant. Every tuber left in the soil, and at harvest you will miss some. Break time 05s always. Sprouts a new plant the following spring. A Jerusalem artichoke planting expands. It does not stop. Break time 5s. If you plant it in an open bed in the middle of your garden, it will spread. This requires management. Break time 05s, and it requires choosing the planting location intentionally. A contained bed works well. Break time 05s, a location along a fence line or property boundary where spreading is not a problem, works perfectly. Break time 05s, a large container sunk to its rim in the ground contains the tuber system completely. Given deliberate placement, break time 05s, the spreading becomes an asset. Free propagation, expanding yield, no annual replanting. The harvest yield, once a stand is established, break time 05s is substantial. A 10-foot row of Jerusalem artichokes in its third year produces 40 to 60 pounds of tubers in a season. Break time? Per square foot of garden space, per year of production, break time 05s, that yield figure competes with or exceeds most annual vegetables and achieves it without replanting, without starting seeds indoors. Break time 05s without purchasing transplants. Cooking options are broad. Roasted with olive oil and salt at high heat, break time 05s. The tubers caramelize at the edges and develop a concentrated sweetness and nuttiness that has almost no direct comparison in the vegetable world. Break Time 05s, thinly sliced raw in a salad, they provide crunch and a mild sweet flavor. Simmered and blended into a soup with stock and cream, Break Time 05s, they produce a smooth, rich result that appears on restaurant menus at a significant price point. Pickled with vinegar and aromatics, Break Time 05s, they hold their texture and develop a sharpness that pairs well with cured meats. One honest caution: inulin ferments in the gut, Break Time 05s. And for people who are not accustomed to eating it, a large first serving of Jerusalem artichoke produces gas. Break Time 05s, the plant's informal nickname in gardening circles, fartichoke, exists for this reason. The practical solution is to begin with small portions. Break Time 05s, eat them regularly over several weeks, and allow the gut microbiome to adjust. Break Time 05's regular consumers of this plant report that the problem resolves with habituation. It is worth working through. Break Time 05s. The nutritional and culinary value of a food plant you can produce in this quantity from this little effort for this many years, Break Time 05s, is not something to discard because of a first serving adjustment period. Break Time 05's named varieties worth sourcing. Fuseau produces a substantially smoother skinned tuber than the standard knobby type. Easier to scrub clean, Break Time 05's more uniform to slice. Clearwater is an early maturing selection, useful in Zone 3 and 4 where the growing season is shorter. Break Time .05 and Stampede is another early season variety with reliable production in cold climate zones. Break Time 05's standard types, sold generically as Jerusalem artichoke or sunchoke, perform reliably across the full zone range and are widely available from seed. Break Time 05's and tuber suppliers. One final observation: this plant is a sunflower. When it blooms in September and October, Break Time 05's, it is among the last significant nectar and pollen sources of the growing season, a resource that matters to native bee populations preparing for. Break Time 05's in winter. The dried seed heads in November host goldfinches. The root system stabilizes and builds soil in any location it occupies. Break Time 05's. It produces food for your household, late-season wildlife value, and structural improvement of neglected ground simultaneously. Break Time 05's, with essentially no annual inputs after the first season. There is not another plant in the edible perennial category that does this combination of things across a zone range this wide at a maintenance. Break Time 05's requirement this low. Plant number 9 plants, 1 planting season, 20 years of food. Asparagus for the spring harvest window. Break Time 05's rhubarb for late spring. Sorrel as your first fresh green of the year. Egyptian walking onion for the year-round cut. Break Time 05's horseradish as a permanent root crop that asks for nothing. Lovage as your celery replacement that grows itself. Break Time 05